You know the expression boiling a frog?
Yeah.
That was me as CEO over the course of 10 years. Just a slow progression of the temperature rising and rising, and me just doubling down on bad behaviors, just spiraling to a point where my body just pushed back and said, enough's enough. I wish, John, I had a self awareness moment. It was not that. This was just a slow burn, me trying to hold on to old behaviors to try and break through the company to the next level that just weren't working.
Welcome to Escape the CEO Doom Loop, where we talk with real-world leaders about the challenge of building great companies without losing your clarity, energy, or sanity. I'm John Ninkovich, joined by my co-host, Glen Dall. Today, we're joined by Peter Oxley, a three-time founder, global CRO, and now the principal coach at Oxygen Advisory. Over a 20-year career, Peter has co-founded and exited a SaaS firm, driven global growth at a customer experience platform, led a digital health company through transformation, and now helps leadership teams install the operating systems he wishes he had earlier. Peter, welcome to our show.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, Peter, it's really a pleasure to have you. We really appreciate you taking the time with us, and I'm eager to hear your story. So, your path from founder, executive to now business coach, I think probably gives you a really powerful lens on what we call the CEO Doom Loop. And I know, John and I have talked with you before about what the CEO Doom Loop is, and I know you've listened to the podcast before, so I really appreciate that. Thank you so much. I think you also know, how does the CEO get out of the doom loop? How do they escape it? The name of our podcast. So, but before we do that, if you wouldn't mind, you just give us a quick snapshot of your background, the companies that you led, and then really, why did you get into coaching?
Yeah, thanks, Glenn. Thanks, John, for
Sure.
having me.
Yeah, glad to have you.
And it's funny when we read out our bios, right? We always focus on the high points, right? All the wins, rah, rah, rah. And I really think, what I'm going to try and bring is the stories like I've eaten a lot of glass in my entrepreneurial career, right? And,
Yeah.
and we get most of our learnings in the darkest days, right? And in the challenges and stuff. And so I think that's, where we can take those lessons forward and help others with them. But yeah, just really quickly, out of college, I was lucky enough to get a gig with Bain & Company. They're a strategy consulting firm out of Boston. Worked with them internationally in the US, Canada, Australia, and overseas in Hong Kong. Just amazing learning. I really didn't know what I wanted to do with my career, so this was a great place to actually go and try a whole bunch of things. When I came back to North America, I was actually working at a marketing agency. I had a real love for strategy and marketing, still do to this day. And that's where I met the co-founder of my first company, right? We had a great idea and we took it out from that agency, and it was a marketing technology startup. That was a slow burn, and we're going to talk a lot about the doom loop there. That was where I was stuck.
You got it there, huh?
Man, oh man. And then after that company, I was actually brought in a role that grew to be the chief revenue officer for a global company. And there was a founder, owner at that, the CEO there, who was also in the doom loop, right? And part of, I think, bringing me into the company was to help with that, to unstuck that CEO and also bring a different perspective as a former founder CEO. And then my third gig, I was actually hired by a founder to be a hired gun CEO, and he was stuck also, right? Tired, not loving being the CEO, and had a lot of fun in that third company because I brought a lot of the learnings forward into that. And now, as you mentioned, I'm a CEO plus leadership team coach. So I'm trying to just help people short circuit, get through things faster, get out of this doom loop, and get back to really enjoying why they started a business, right? To get the freedom, to have the fun, and to work much better as a team versus, being a solo entrepreneur, right? Just taking everything on their back.
Yeah. You're referring to your time as the CEO at Reward Stream. as
Correct.
your kind of your first introduction to the CEO doom loop, right? Which is this
Yeah.
almost point of despair as a CEO.
Hmm.
And the way I described it in my journey as a CEO is kind of like I'm walking a plank in shark infested water. So it's just like, I don't know if I could do this anymore. Like it's killing me. It's so hard. What did you know you were there? What it look like for you? How'd you recognize that you were in that doom loop?
I think, the expression boiling a frog.
Yeah.
That was me as CEO over the course of 10 years, right? It was
Okay.
like, I don't think I realized, and we'll talk about when I realized things needed to change, but it was just a slow progression of the temperature rising and rising and me just doubling down on bad behaviors, right? And
Mm.
sort of just self-neglect on all fronts and just spiraling to a point where my body just pushed back, right? And said enough's enough, right? But I wish, John, that there was like a flash of like I had a self-awareness moment. It was not that. This was just a slow burn, me trying to hold on to old behaviors to try and break through the company to the next level that just weren't working.
Did you think that was part of being the CEO?
Oh man, yes. Yes, I thought if 40 hours was good, 80 hours was going to be twice as good. I needed to be and should be the smartest person in the room, and I quite
Mm.
often
Yeah.
didn't feel that, right? I felt, I think we talk a lot about imposter syndrome. And I also thought it was my job to fill in for all the gaps. Like if we couldn't afford to hire someone, it was my job to take that extra role on. If we had to lay off employees, I had to fill in all the gaps and take stuff on so that the team could focus, right? And so you just get this, I look back now and it was a hero syndrome, right? I was
Mm.
I was the hero.
Hmm.
I was
Yeah.
wearing the cape and saving the day, right? And working myself into oblivion.
Yeah. What did it feel like personally, Peter, when you were, working those 80-hour weeks and doubling down and taking on roles? What did it feel like?
Alone. So first of all, alone. And I would actually say, just increasingly tired, right? You
Mm.
realize in retrospect you're getting tired. I got really frustrated. I would say that's the capital F frustrated, right? And we know this when we don't sleep well and we're not doing the things that fill our cup again. I got very frustrated with the people around me. I used to quite often say, why don't they just get it? We hire A players, we hire
Mm.
amazing people. Why don't they just get what they're supposed to do? Right? I kept an impossibly high standard, right, for those people that were working with me. And then I would clip their work. When it came to me, it was never good enough. And then I
Mm.
would just do it. Obviously, that reinforces a really bad behavior that people aren't going to give you their best if they know you're just going to redo it. Just easier
Yep.
to do everything myself, right?
Yeah.
I wanted to drill down a little bit into the loneliness. Like what,
Hmm.
because here's the thing. Oh, you're CEO. And I remember one time my son, he texted me at work and he said, "Can you send me a picture of your office?" And I said, "Sure." I took a picture of my office. Asked him later, and I was like, "Why did you want that?" He goes, "Well, I was telling my friends I was CEO, and they want to know, did you have a big corner office with a view?" And like, no, we're in an industrial park, and like, it's not. But I look out at the parking lot, and I just think like there's so many of us that have these views of like, oh, you're the CEO, you're the boss, you run the company, you've got it easy, you make all this money, you don't have to work that hard. But like you, I was very lonely and very frustrated. So I'm curious to hear more about the loneliness.
Yeah, I think it probably comes back from I felt like I needed to have all the answers, right? Came from this big successful management consulting background, where we're going in and doing important work for big companies. You had to speak assertively and confidently to execs. So I kind of took that to running my company as I must know. I must know everything, right? People need to look to me as being this pillar of sort of you have the answers, right? And I think that just creates loneliness in the role, right? It's like you don't have all the answers as CEO. You need to, let people obviously work well with the team, have confidence in the team that you can actually prevail in tough circumstances. But it's okay to be a little bit vulnerable and say you don't have the answers. And I was not there in my first gig. I was not there. I needed to be the person that was strong for the team, had the answers, had the strategy, and I really struggled with that privately, that I didn't have the answers and I didn't have anyone to talk to about it. There's no one. I had investors. If I had gone to my venture capitalists with not having the answers, it would have been a long walk off a short plank, right? So
Right.
it's
Yeah.
very, very lonely,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Or a short walk off a short plank, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So when you go back to that, and you talked about, it was interesting. You said you thought you had an A-player team, but you weren't. You were had incredibly high standards. So we would define it as a bit of a ball buster, right? So if you go back and look at that team today, do you think you had the right people? Or you as a leader just weren't at the point that you could empower your people? You could hear them when they said, hey, this isn't, we need to do something different, or this isn't the right metric, or this isn't the right approach. Where were you at in that journey?
I've thought a lot about this in retrospection, looking back. We had great people. Like,
Wow.
this was not an issue of under hiring, right? We had amazing talent, right? So this is what I'm focusing on. So A players are a combination of two things, right? We know this, right? They have the
Mm-hmm.
skills, they have the competencies, and also the culture and the core values. Okay, so I overhired, and I would say just really hired people who were pistols at their roles. They were amazing, but we were lost culturally. It was a total blind spot for me as a CEO. The people
Mm-hmm.
side of the business, the soft side of the business, I was all strategy, execution, work
Yeah.
harder,
Hard edge.
and I just did not put enough weight on culture and making sure that there was a known culture, what we valued. I would say there was two of us as co-founders, and we couldn't have been more different as people and what we valued in a business, right? And we never netted out, I think, properly on what the core values and the culture of the business was. And I think
Yeah.
it was an impossibly hard place. If I was looking back and coaching that business now, be like, wow, we have two cultures inside this business. In retrospect, probably my co-founder's culture was the better one than
Wow.
what I was driving at, right?
Interesting. So you hired
Yeah.
people that really could perform at a really high level in a role, but they couldn't fit the culture, is what you're saying.
Well, we didn't even know what the culture was, John,
Yeah.
Mm.
right? Was the issue, right? Like I valued hard work, again, be fast, be brilliant, be gone, right? As a CEO, I was as red as could be. My nickname was the bulldozer at my first company. Affectionately, I think people called me that. And so I recruited people into the business.
Yeah,
That's not what
sure.
I heard. No.
I recruited people in that like that, right? Ex-agency people, ex-management consultant. They just wanted to run
Yeah.
fast and hard. Right now,
Yeah.
we know that's probably not a great culture for building a lasting business that needed creativity and needed. It's interesting about the A player. You have to tick both boxes, right? And the culture and the people and the playing as a team was not there.
Mm.
Yeah. That's a great point, Peter. And I do some work with some startups around town and a startup lab. And one of the things people always say, well, when, we're too busy looking for product market fit, or we're just getting the company going. We don't have time for that culture stuff or that planning stuff. And they say, well, when should, they'll ask me, when do you think a, company should start doing it? I said, as soon as there's more than one person. I said, maybe even just one
Hmm.
person,
Hmm.
because exactly your point, you get two or more people, you've got a culture, you just don't know what it is.
Hmm.
And you're not curating it. You're not, right. You're
Hmm.
not growing it and intentional. Just like you said, we hire for skills, or remember in sales, we'd hire for the Rolodex. Who do they know? Never thought about the culture piece. So
Hmm.
yeah, I'm with you there. So Peter, I'm curious, like thank you for being so vulnerable yourself and talking about that time for yourself, the doom loop and the loneliness and the frustration. John and I certainly resonate with that from our days. And we talk to a lot of CEOs these days, same thing. But when did you see in your career a maturity where you started recognizing some of these behaviors that were holding you in the doom loop? And how did you, how do you see yourself as starting to work out of that?
So I'm gonna get very real here. I hope none of your listeners get to this extent, right? In how the doom loop can play itself out. So I mentioned just working super long hours, right? Had a young family at home. I gained probably 25 to 30 pounds. I
Oh,
stopped working out, and
Yep.
fitness is incredibly important for me to stay grounded and stuff. So, and de-stressed. I felt like I was failing at home and I was failing at work. I couldn't win. It's just a thankless place to be when you're sort of the
hmm
rope and the tug of war between that. And, you know, my wife referred to herself as a single mom at the time.
mm,
I remember just at the stage, we were so stretched that it was like we needed to put our payroll on home equity line of credit, right?
mm,
Like just to give you a sense of the sort of
Yeah.
pressure that we were under, right?
yeah.
A lot of mouths to feed, right? So I remember driving home. It was my wife's birthday. I was late, right? And I got the most intense pain in my chest while I was driving. And I'm having a heart attack, right? This is
Yeah.
it, right? So
hmm
called my wife. She says, "Pull over, for God's sakes." I was right in front of the hospital. She's a nurse, and it was the hospital where she works at. So I went in, got all the tests done, and they can tell if you've had a heart attack or not by your blood work. I had not had a heart attack, and everyone's saying, "No,
hmm
you're good to go." And I'm saying to my wife, "What do you mean I'm good to go?" And she said, "We'll talk about it at home." So I'd had a really severe anxiety or a panic attack,
Yeah.
like crippling. And I was like, wow, now what do I do?
Yeah.
Right. So you talk about waking up out of the doom loop. Like
Yeah.
this was basically my body and my situation was such that I was like, I got to make a change. It would have been frankly better if I'd had a heart attack because I could have gone in and, maybe had an operation or something or taken some medicine to stop this. But this was I realized at this point I had to change how I was operating or else I wasn't going to be there for the business or for my young family or wife. Right. So this was my wake up moment was that like it wasn't and it was pretty severe and I hope no one gets to that point, right? It gets that severe that people have to experience that.
How old are you in this, and how far into your journey as a CEO of Reward Stream is this occurring?
I was about 8 years in, John,
Okay.
at this was the financial crisis of 2008,
Okay.
right? So this is
mm
what I'm saying. I wish I'd learned earlier. I have learned I'm a very slow learner at stuff, and we'll talk about the slow arc of the business and my learning events in this. But yes, this was 8 years, like to get to this point. This is what I'm saying, boiling a frog.
Yeah.
So what did you do? You
Yeah.
had this moment. Some people might say that you hit rock bottom,
Yep,
this panic attack,
yep.
and you're here today to tell us about it. So what happened after that?
Yeah, so again, a slow arc, right? Because again, I'll just go on that theme. I'm a slow learner, right? I did get a personal coach, right? I got, so again, not a CEO plus leadership team coach. I thought I needed some help, right, with regards to this. So,
hmm
which was a great first step. So now I had someone to talk to and stuff, right? But what it lacked was the system behind it, right? So the next step was I joined what became Metronomics, right? The first version of
Mhm.
Metronomics was a program that was offered locally here that Shannon, our Metronomics creator, it was called the Growth Strategy Program, and I enrolled in that to actually learn. I needed to learn, right? I admitted
Okay.
to myself that I actually needed to get a system to put in place to break out of this, right? And I didn't have to create this, right? Prior to that, I had self-implemented rock habits,
Okay.
right?
hmm
But again, I'm a former management consultant. I'm the smartest guy in the room. Why do I
Yeah.
need a
Yeah.
coach? Why do I need a coach? I could just read the book and do this, right? Like, and it
Yep.
was so bad, right? Because it's
This
like
is
I'm fumbling my way in the dark on these
Yeah.
tools. The team knows I don't know what I'm doing. I'm trying to facilitate the sessions and participate in it.
Yeah.
It was just the slowest way to get there, right? And I think the other thing I had was this self belief that getting a coach was frivolous,
Yep.
right? We can't afford it. This is self indulgent to get a coach. We can barely make payroll. How can I afford a coach,
mm,
right? A coach is I got to put that money towards paying more people, hiring back the team. In retrospect, I squandered hundreds of thousands of dollars of the companies, like just on wasted opportunity and time.
yeah.
But I
Yep.
just had this belief set that I just couldn't. It was self indulgent to get a coach.
So you're 8 years in, 10 years in, right? You're probably 8 years in.
Yep.
Is it the point that you figured out I need somebody else to help me? And how did you go through that process to figure that out and figure out what you wanted and what you needed?
Yeah, so I got the system, right? I got the system between scaling up and sort of Shannon's first stages of metronomics. I got a personal coach, but I realized I didn't have the team coach, right? So, but at this stage, basically, we go through exit out of reward stream, the first
Okay.
business, right? So
Yeah.
Okay.
the lesson is incomplete, right? We sort of get some of the building blocks, the foundational blocks, right, in place, but I didn't get to see it through at my first company. That company exited and was sold. There was a real big learning event for me though towards the end of my career there. I hired the CEO of our former competitor to come in, and
Mm.
he'd exited his business. He came in, he had no interest being a CEO anymore. He's like, I'm going to head up biz dev and sales. He's like,
Okay.
thank God you have to deal with the investors. You can manage that, have that monkey on your back. But he was I learned a lot from actually bringing in someone who gave me perspective on what I could do differently and start to play better as a team. Right, that was a huge learning event, and also, so we grew the company to record revenues and record profitability, and basically it exited. Then I found myself moving on to my next gig, right? But I wish I could say I had the epiphany and it was a perfect metamorphosis at Reward Stream. It was not. I was still only partially formed, right?
Is that
Yeah.
because you hadn't got through it all? Is that what it was?
Yeah, I think probably there's two things there, right? That I actually say to CEOs. It's businesses need to grow in whatever way, shape, or form in order to provide opportunity to everyone, right? Like
Mm-hmm.
the team that's working for you. I probably stayed in my first business too long,
Mm.
right? I needed to let go. It probably was the best thing for the team and stuff for me to have moved on earlier. And I don't say that lightly because I think most times I think founders get clipped and business owners that's the easy route
Yeah.
out, right? We know that from working with our clients. They want to run for the fire exit and they're not going to sell their businesses and get the value that they want for it
Yeah.
Yep.
because of the
Yeah.
same problems that they're trying to run away from, right? So, but I think in that instance, John, it was 13 years front to back from when I started
Oh,
that
Oh,
business to when I left it, right?
well, it's a
And
long
I
time.
wow.
really do I do think, you know, sometimes businesses have their seasons, right? And that
Yeah.
was a tough business, and I needed to probably have moved on and gone to my second venture sooner.
Oh, it's fascinating.
Oh,
Why didn't you?
So this is again the owner's dilemma, right? Your identity is the business,
Mm.
right? Failure is not an option when this is your baby. You gave
Yeah.
birth to it, right?
Yep.
So you hold on tightly to this thing needs to be successful. If it fails, that means I'm a failure. You're vested in it from your family. You've put all the time in. I'd raised money from investors. I'd had friends and family money in. Our co-founder had all of his family money in our business. Failure was not an option,
Yeah.
right? And I just could not separate myself from the business.
It's funny, Peter. I was in a very similar situation with my first time being a CEO, where I had a bunch of my own money and I had family money in. We controlled 55% of the company, something like that, and we had other investors, and I stayed too long too, and could have left and done really well doing something else, but I felt this like need to stay there to help, run the company, and leaving would have been like failure, and I felt like
Hmm.
I was also leaving family money, which I had great impact on the ability to grow that hopefully. So I did the exact same thing you're talking about and stayed probably 3 years too long. That was 10 years. I should have left after 7.
I love the point that you made about, coaching, but also about having a system and about the self-implementation of a system as a CEO, because I can imagine, right? You didn't really know the system, you know what you were doing, you knew your business. So you're trying to be a facilitator and a participant. And I've got to believe, based on my own experience doing this very similar thing, is that you were really directing the process especially with the hero syndrome, being the smartest guy in the room and the boss of everyone else. So I love that point, and also the point about bringing in the former CEO of your competitor, and how that made a difference in your business because he was able to give you that insight that you didn't have on your own.
When you're facilitating it as head of company, as CEO, I could see, and the team almost disengaged from the process because I think they felt like I was trying to guide it to the outcome I'd already decided,
Yeah.
right? Like,
Sure.
and they were right. They
Yeah.
were right. I'd spent hours in
Yeah.
my office on the whiteboard brainstorming strategy and everything like that. So I was going to use the framework as a tool to make my desired future come true. And they could see it, right? They could see it,
Yeah.
right? And that's not what we need to do, right? We know this. Like, this is strategy as a system. We do it together as a team. We get a much more fulsome outcome and perspective when we do it together, right? So I just look back and it's farcical. Like, just now
Yeah.
looking back on what I was doing, I was like, oh gosh, if I could go back and coach myself at this stage, right?
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. Yes. So much what you're saying I resonate with. I remember being like in the conference room all day by myself, writing out, this drawing on the whiteboard, this grand strategy, and then bringing people in. What do you think? And they just like, okay. Just
And then being
wrong.
frustrated that they don't get it, right? Why don't
Yeah.
you get it?
Yeah.
Why can't you see it? Yeah.
Yeah.
All right. Well, Peter, let's thank you for sharing the story again, because it's great to see this kind of chronology. So then let's go up to then your next CEO role. And,
Yep.
what was your mindset then going into sitting in that chair, and how did you approach it differently? And then how did you not approach it differently? I'm assuming you probably fell back into some old habits.
Yeah, it's interesting. So remember, I had a little gap there where I was actually a member of an executive team, right? So that provides a really interesting perspective to go from being a CEO to being a senior executive and actually seeing some of your own behaviors that you had at the previous one play out. It gave me a real empathy and perspective for what it's like to be a member of the leadership team when someone's exhibiting doom loop behaviors, right? You really see it in spades. I sat in the chair. I was like, wow. And I ran metronomics for the division, for the sales and marketing area. I ran metronomics, right? So,
Okay.
and it was interesting. The other leaders and team members inside that company would say, why does that area, they seem to be really clear with what they're doing and they're fired up and they got objectives and, and it wasn't being run in the rest of the company because the CEO didn't believe in it right at that stage, right? So I take that learning and go to the next gig, right? And remember, it's not my baby now. I'm a hired gun. I'm hired in, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so I don't have the personal identity lined up with the business, right? I can be very objective, right? Which is, I think, what we need to bring to our clients when we're coaching is objectivity, right? They need to
Mm-hmm. Yep.
separate their what they think, right? So I could bring that in, and I had a system. I had metronomics, right? I actually begged Shannon to take me on as a coaching client, right? So I got a coach, right? And coach the system. So now the team is learning metronomics alongside me. I'm not the smartest guy in the room. I'm quite happy to admit I don't know certain things and we need to learn the framework from people who have mastered it. So I think it's just a different perspective, Glenn, to answer your question, when it's not
Mm-hmm.
your baby. And I could clearly see where my vision was very clouded early on, right? And we can see that when we work with business owners, right? And
Yeah.
family businesses and founders and co-founders. They can be very myopic and blinded by what they assume to be true and how they're working with their teams.
So when you talked about you were able to kind of reflect back on the things maybe you were blind to earlier, as you had Shannon start work with Shannon as a coach, what were those, one or two things that you're like, oh gosh.
I use an expression a lot with the teams I coach now that clarity is kindness. Clarity of all across all dimensions. But let's just start with functional scorecards, right? Starting with the head of company's functional scorecard. Had I had that in my first gig as CEO, these are the things that you are primarily accountable for, right? So vision and the culture of the organization,
Mm-hmm.
right? Core values, purpose, long term. Like I didn't think about that. That was a fluffy role, right? But everyone on the leadership team having very clear scorecards, getting the right people on the field in the right positions, and being able to have objective, fact-based discussions about whether or not, what skills they need, what competencies they need to up their game
Mm-hmm.
is critical, right? It takes the emotion and the drama out of everything. I
Yeah.
would just say
Yeah.
there was very little drama when I came back to being CEO because everything could be objective, right? And it wasn't a personal affront. It was like maybe this person's not a fit for this season of the business or for the role. We need to make a change because it's the success of the team, right? And I really bound against the cause. It was a healthcare company bringing affordable healthcare to people who couldn't necessarily afford what they were doing. So we had a really strong purpose that our
Mm-hmm.
team actually bound against, right? So, but I think just clarity, John, to answer your question, it's around clarity
Okay.
and objectivity around almost the strategy. Does everyone know it? Do they know their role? Can we measure success
Yeah.
easily, right?
Awesome.
Yeah. Great point, Peter. The scorecard is something that a lot of companies, I had never known what that was and the clarity that brings versus a job description. And I think even as you talked about what are the core, those critical accountabilities for head of the company, I didn't know that as a CEO. And I think, and that's why I was always doing other people's jobs because that was my comfort zone that,
Mm-hmm.
I can do this. That was the hero syndrome, but I really, really did not know what I should have been doing truly as a CEO. Wasn't clear, nor was to
I
anybody
actually,
else.
I thought it was my job, and I remember repeating this to people. They're saying, "Why are you working so long? You're working first thing in the morning, late at night." I said, "It's my job as CEO to unstuck everyone.
Mm.
I got
Mm-hmm.
to clear the way for them to be productive when they come in the morning." And I'm like, it was so misguided, right? It was so like it was the hero syndrome on steroids, right? I think I got such an endorphin hit from solving problems for people. It validated me, right? It made me feel like I was needed and wanted and
Yeah.
stuff. And I was doing it so that they could be productive in their days, but I was neglecting my core accountabilities as CEO and head of company.
Wow.
Yeah. Yeah. You're doing a job for me. And John, you and I were talking about this yesterday. How does an A-player leader feel when their leader tries to do their job for them?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
They don't stick around long, right? I mean, it's really disengaging when somebody hires you to do a job and then they won't let you do the job and then you can't do the job at the level they want to, and then they're going to do it the way they want to. It just is, it's hard for people to stick around in that environment for sure.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So Peter, if you look at kind of the results that you got of being a CEO at RewardStream and then being a CEO in the next iteration of Starling Minds, like
Yeah,
what you see happen from like an overall quality of life perspective and a business performance perspective?
it was fun in its last iteration. It was fun. It was a challenging business. I'm not saying Starling, that healthcare business, it was a challenging time and stuff, but I would say overall we had fun as a
Mm.
business and grew the business well as a team. I knew my role was to actually make sure that there was a really strong leadership team that was there that could survive. I signed up for a short gig as CEO. And so I knew my role was to actually leave the company much better than I took it on with as far as strength of leadership team that was there. So I think it's like playing as a team, knowing what positions people were playing on the pitch. We worked really hard as a team again to figure out our commercialization strategy, and it worked. I was able to go home, have a good personal life where I could still focus. I was working hard. I don't like to use work-life balance because it's different for every person that you talk to. But for me, I was able to actually feel fulfilled at work and still be present in my home life and, exercising, being there for my kids at their events. It couldn't have been more different than the first gig. It was night and day different.
That's awesome. When you talk and use the word commercialization strategy, what does that mean to you?
How do you make money? generate cash for the business. So let's go back to it. Cash is our oxygen, right? With cash, you generating cash for a business gives you a lot of degrees of freedom for things to do, right? So I think, John, in that business, the product was great. It actually, for the end users, was delivering really like clinically significant results for them, improving their health. But the company couldn't figure out a way to make money from it that was sustainable, right? The unit economics, we could not deliver money. So that when I talk about commercialization, it's like this is the difference when we talk to people. There's end users for the product, and then there's your core customer who pays you for it,
Yep.
right? It's like, okay, how are we unlocking value for a core customer that will actually pay a premium for it above other options, including free options that were in the market? And are we uniquely serving their needs, right? So we really doubled down on core customer, right? What are their needs? What are their needs? And had to find that. So when we talk about commercialization, it was honing in on that part of the value chain.
Awesome. So it's really figuring out who your core customer is. What do they really want? Right. And then how do you get in the market to provide that service to them effectively so you can monetize it
Yeah,
consistently, create cash?
you got it.
Yeah.
Peter, I would love to know now. So you were CEO, describe that learning arc from when you're very first starting out, the CEO is hero, the smartest guy in the room, the imposter syndrome, I'm sure, your panic attack, and then, having learned that being on leadership team and then being CEO to the point of when you're saying like, it could be fun. I think for many CEOs, that's like an incredible concept. We've doing our Doom Loop interviews or CEO playbook interviews. I hear CEOs saying, when I say, what is it you really want out of life? They say, oh, I just want to make enough money so I can retire and do what I really want to do. And I always get like lose a little bit of my heart. Like, you're not doing what you really want to do. You should be having fun. You should be having a purpose, like you said, do something in the world. But you, Peter, when you left with your last CEO gig, you decided to become a CEO plus leadership team coach and with
Yep.
Metronomics, which is how we
Yep.
all met. Talk a little bit about, that change and that decision.
Yeah, I had a choice. Do I go back in? Do I go back in and sort of work on a company? And I think, once you get a little long in the tooth, sort of in running companies, there was lots of opportunities for me to go in and rescue injured companies, right? To go in,
Mhm.
they were broken, come in and fix. But I actually decided I was much more fulfilled and wanted my purpose to be to help more CEOs, more business owners than just one company, right? And that was my take the eating glass over the course of my career and try and help people to avoid the pain that comes from those hard lessons, right? And that's why I think Shannon called me while I was away. I think I was on a beach in Mexico pondering what was next in life. And she said, have you considered becoming a coach? I think you'd be really good at it. And I hadn't even considered it at that point. And that's when I thought, I think that this is probably the best next path for me to help more people avoid the pitfalls, like to have a good business, have fun at it. The reason why you start a business, financial freedom, right? Freedom of time, freedom of money, right? And to do it better as a team with a team approach and not wait for the paycheck of selling your business to realize your dreams. Because we know this, right? The exit just comes with a check, and the check is to actually fuel your dreams, right? So
Yeah.
when I'm talking to people and they're tired and they say, I want to sell my business, I'm like, what are you going to do with that money? And they don't know.
Yeah. Yeah.
They just think it's going to give them, all of a sudden, they're going to have, a few $1 million and that's going to be the answer to their problems. And we know it's not, right? They need to, and if you can actually uncrack well, what do you want to do in the future when you get that money? Let's start doing it right now, right? Let's start doing it while you're running your business, right?
Right.
You can do both, right? So that's why I got into coaching, was to try and help people avoid the landmines and the glass I've eaten over my career.
Yeah. As a coach, what's the kind of overarching thing that you see most businesses struggling with? Is there one thing that you think about or that you see consistently?
Almost inevitably comes back to people,
Yeah.
right? The people issues,
Right.
it doesn't matter what sector, manufacturing, tech, professional services, it all comes down to the team and having a team, A players, so really good people that know how to get on the field and play their role, and that they fit culturally together,
Yes.
right? You can
Yeah.
solve so many ills when you have smart people that know their role and they get along well. You can just overcome so many things, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it's fun.
Yeah. It's fun. I just finished Speed of Trust, Stephen Covey's book, and it's interesting because he takes the same kind of concept we're talking about, but he calls it trust and competency. So competency is performance in your role, and we talked about having clarity. What is that role? What's the accountability for the functional role? But trust, I think, does equal culture, because if we're a cultural fit, then we really can begin to trust each other as people and as teammates. And it doesn't happen without the team. All right. Is Peter ready for our signature ending question?
I think so.
All right, go ahead, John.
So, Peter, if you were writing the CEO playbook about escape the CEO doom loop, what 3 practices would you say that every CEO must lock in?
Okay, so I think first and foremost, scorecards, right? Functional scorecards. With the end in mind is you need to get A players on the team that fit with the skills and competencies as well as with the culture, right? So, and again, getting that around you as a leadership team, you'll solve a lot of ills. So okay, so now you've got the scorecards in place. I think stop being the hero. Stop being the hero, right? Switch the question, and I know we all coach in the what do you recommend? So just sort of zip it. When someone comes with a challenge or a problem, just ask them, what do you recommend, right? What do you recommend? And those two things will create an incredible amount of space, right, for you as a CEO, because now you can actually work on your scorecard. And that brings me to my last sort of thing, which is time blocking. Time blocking, right? Being very, very thoughtful with regards to, the blocks of time, at least 4 hours a day in your calendar of blocks, 2 2-hour blocks. Don't check your email. Get an executive assistant. Again, another thing that I was too, as a CEO, I would not pay for, because that was frivolous as well.
Yeah.
But you got to get out of the noise and just actually stop the switching, the multitasking, and actually focus on the stuff that moves the needle. And, and I wouldn't be a coach if I didn't do a shameless plug for this. But it's like, of course, having someone, a coach in your corner that can actually really focus you onto your blind spots and help you on this journey is going to get you there faster, right? So whatever, you got to find someone that fits with you and coach the system in. But man, you're going to go a lot faster when you've got someone, a coach that's holding you to account and talking about the uncomfortable things that you need to change.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's awesome.
Yeah. Those all very good points, Peter.
Yeah.
Really, thanks so much for your time. Peter, one last thing. Is there anything that you feel we should have talked about or asked you that you feel would be important to share?
You had one question about personal practices that keep you out of the doom loop. What would I have, right? But again, just having a morning routine is really important for me. Starting the day with gratitude, staying, focused on the positive in your life, because you're going to fight a lot of fires when you go into the office. And exercising, right? Exercising is critical. And I find most of the CEOs I coach need to remind them that they need to look after their own health first, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. That's great. Peter,
thanks, guys.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.